Okay, so let's begin our Lotus Sutra study program, and we welcome you to our study session today for our monthly Lotus Sutra study. These study sessions are not meant to be academic or theoretical or intellectual. They're really trying to present the Lotus Sutra from a personal standpoint, which is really guided by our own individual journeys. So really, what does this sort of mean to us in our daily life? And how does the teachings, the parables, the stories, the phrases, the verses, sort of provide insights for us and perhaps motivations for us as we go forward in our daily life. So that's really the focus of what we're trying to do. This chapter is chapter 12, Devadatta, and I am just astonished. I've been reading Lotus Sutra for years and years, and I really am grateful for, because I keep finding new things that I've never seen before in this. And I feel like this chapter 12 had always really bothered me. Of course, the dragon princess having to turn into a man. I mean, what kind of misogynistic nonsense is that? And then Devadatta, this really evil guy, why does he get to be enlightened? And it's like, I just felt like this was just a crappy chapter. And it really always bothered me. And it was sort of like, wow, when I got into it, started really thinking about it, it was like, wow, there's so much here for us all as sort of another sort of parable into our own personal journeys. So as we do, when we start, let's go ahead and do a brief recitation from the chapter. And I invite you to please join in if you would like. So let's go ahead and do a quick chant of two portions of this chapter. The Buddha said to the monks, the king of that time was me, and the hermit of that time is now the man Devadatta. Because Devadatta was my good friend, I was able to perfect the 6 paramitas as well as benevolence, compassion, sympathetic joy, and impartiality. I gained the 32 marks, the 80 kinds of beautiful feature, the deep golden purple hue, the 10 powers, the 4 kinds of fearlessness, the 4 methods of good interaction, the 18 unique characteristics, and the transcendent powers of the way. I attained perfect awakening and extensively liberated living beings. All of this is due to the good friendship of Devadatta. He said to all in the 4 groups, infinite kalpas after he passes away, Devadatta will become a Buddha called King of Heavenly Beings, Tathagata. Yes, the daughter of the Dragon King Sagara, just 8 years old. She is wise of king faculties and well acquainted with the actions and deeds arising from the sense faculties of living beings. She has gained Aranis, has been able to receive, embrace all of the extremely profound innermost treasuries of teachings and has deeply entered into meditation and fathomed all things. She aspired to awakening and attained non-retrogression in a single instant. She has unhindered powers of eloquence. She has compassion for living beings as if they were her own newborn children, replete with merits the thoughts of her mind, and the arguments she voices are sublime, vast and great, benevolent and compassionate, kind and considerate, gentle and elegant in her disposition. She is able to achieve awakening. Thank you. So, chapter 12 was added to the Lotus Sutra very late in the process. We think sometime around 400, 500 Common Era. So it came in late. The significance, by the way, of the Dragon Princess's age being 8 years old is that it's 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra. Kind of a fun fact. But really the premise and the most important message of all in this chapter is that the Buddha's love and compassion, inclusion, intolerance, let me start again. Jeez. By the way, just a side note, this was a really challenging week for me personally. I had a lot of family stuff come up, just triggered all kinds of old memories, and as our friends in England say, I am a bit wobbly. So I hope that this lecture is informative, but it's very difficult for me to be here today. So let me start again. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. The Buddha's love, compassion, his inclusion, tolerance, and patience are so miraculous that anyone and everyone can transform and awaken through this chapter, this sutra. And Nichiren Daishonin himself emphasized many times that the Buddha's great compassion covers all people without discrimination. And that was actually very radical for his time. He was really perhaps maybe one of, or the only major Buddhist teacher at the time who was advocating that women were fully able to attain awakening, that there was nothing about any kind of bodily function that was bad. He was very inclusive and very much covering everybody. So again, Devadatta represents the Icchantika, which are evil, ignorant people that even they can awaken, and so he's the stand-in for that. And then the Dragon Princess is the stand-in that women can attain awakening. So very radical. And I think that this chapter was probably added as a clarity to the profundity and inclusion of the Lotus Sutra, because there was still this idea that only certain people could attain awakening, and you had to go through certain things or be a certain type of person or a certain whatever that definition was, only that particular kind of person. So it was like the people of the time, and we don't know exactly what happened, but they felt, we need to clarify that the Buddha's message applies to everyone equally. And that's why in our prayers, we talk about the Lotus Sutra being the teaching of great equality for everyone. And I was thinking about this. We've talked about this morning when I had finished Gongyo and I was out for my walk with my dog, I thought about the Lotus Sutra and how we've talked before that the Lotus Sutra itself probably was not, most likely was not taught or represent the specific words of the Buddha. So is that a problem? Are any of the Mahayana sutras actual words of the Buddha? And then the Pali Canon, are any of those really? I mean, there's, is any of this? I mean, we know more about the historical Jesus than we know about the historical Buddha. So, sometimes I felt like, wow, well, if the Buddha didn't really say this, what is this religion that we're following? And my career when I was working was in high tech, and it was in artificial intelligence. And one of the ways that you build artificial intelligence, these learning systems, is through crowdsourcing. And so these amazing systems, you take the data from thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of photographs. So Google, when Google came up with its photo recognition capabilities, it crowdsourced it out to everybody and to say, is this a cat? Is this a dog? Is this a puppy curled up, or is this a bagel? And so this incredibly powerful tool is a result of crowdsourcing. And I said, wow, the Lotus Sutra itself, one could think about, is the result of crowdsourcing 1,500 years of practice that started with Shakyamuni's awakening. And as he taught, and those people taught, it's like throwing a stone into a pond, the ripples start to go out. And as the timeline just flows out, more and more people did this practice, became awakened, had these insights, started to write these insights down, started to express them in these sutras. So really, the Lotus Sutra, to me, is the result of 1,500 years of practice of hundreds of thousands of men and women, monks, nuns, laymen and laywomen, crowdsourced into this fabulous document. And then I thought, wow, that's remarkable. How many religions state that are so comfortable, like this is the result of all of us, the Sangha, practicing together? And I was like, wow, it just really made me feel really powerful about and validated this practice. So going back to what Nichiren, going back to chapter 12, and that this was added late, and I think it was added late for a reason, to say, look, everybody can be awakened, and we're going to use some stand-ins to present, at the time that women had not been recognized as being able to be awakened, and that evil people were not able to be awakened. Let's sort of create this parable and this story, this mythology, and show that yes, they can. And Devadatta, Nichiren in his Ongi Kuden talks about this, that Devadatta symbolizes the realm of hell, the lower world, hell, and the dragon princess, the realm of Buddhahood, and that together they represent the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, and Enichen and Sanzen. So that's what his personal takeaway of these two characters is showing us. And then in the Ongi Kuden, he talks about this line of a precious jewel, that because the dragon princess offers this precious jewel, pearl, to the Buddha, and gives it to him, and in that instant is when she awakens. Of course, now she's already been awakened, but she becomes awakened, and she uses it as this example, this metaphor, to show the monks, to say, look, I gave them this jewel. Didn't he take it quickly? And the answer was yes, he took it immediately. And again, this becomes this sort of representative of how fast one can become awakened. So Nichiren says that the three words, a precious jewel, A is myoho, and precious is the workings of the wondrous law, and jewel is the manifestation of the wondrous law. And Michael, you never got back to me on my query, but I think for me, this is really similar to the three bodies of the Buddha. Myoho is the Dharmakaya, the precious workings is the Sambhogakaya, and the jewel manifestation is the accommodative body, the Nirmanakaya. And so again, this precious jewel, that those three words mean so much about the three bodies of the Buddha and how it all works together, and symbolizes that it all happens in an instant. And very quickly, again, I pass this jewel, I give this to you, you take it, and it's instantly in that moment that everyone can awaken in their very body, which is Sokushin Jobutsu, and have this sudden awakening, this sudden insight into the reality, Shohojiso, of the reality of life. And so this idea of the dragon princess somehow feeling that she has to, through skillful means, express her enlightenment by turning into a man. She didn't really turn into a man. She did it as an expedient device, because that was what those poor SOB monks, arhats, needed to see in order to believe it was possible. And then Devadatta turned into this really horrible guy. And this is a morality play for us, that there are so many dangers of personal ambition and jealousy and pride and lust and prejudice about us versus them. And you don't look like me, so you're different, or I'm this and you're that, and therefore we can't be X, and biases. This whole chapter to me speaks of inclusion and equity and diversity, and checking our own shit at the door when we go forth. And that's the story behind all this for me. And this is a companion, and I call it a parable. It's not, they don't really consider this a parable, but I think it's a story. It's a companion piece If you remember, several months ago, the parable of the wealthy man and the poor son, which, as you know, I presented really as a morality play about self-image and how if we think we're not worthy, then we're not worthy. But if we think we are, then we can enter the gate, go to the Pure Land, and attain enlightenment. So these two stories go together, and they talk about checking our own ambitions and checking our own self-image, and how does that become a fetter and a block for us to go and experience reality as it is and awaken. And then finally, a really strong, very strong teaching from the Buddha that we need good friends to awaken, that we cannot do this by ourselves, which is why the Sangha is one of the three treasures. And the Buddha, when he says, look, I was a king and I became awakened because of Devadatta, my good friend Devadatta, who was a son of a gun, right? My good friend Devadatta awakened me, or helped me become awakened. He didn't do it, and he helped. And so even the Buddha needed teachers and friends. So if, and he's like the guy, he's the person that led the way for us all. And by his example, because he did it, because he's a normal person made up of the five aggregates, because he was able to attain awakening, he showed that all of us can attain awakening. And then he teaches all these ideas that, look, we need each other and we need all of us together to do it. So those are the highlights of chapter 12. I've got a few more slides to go into some details. I do want to stop and just say, does anyone want to ask a question or make a comment, or we'll just keep rolling?
Well,
Actually, I have a question.
Yes, please.
I mean, I think, I'm not sure if the chapter points to any like morality play or dangers of ambition, pride, lust, and prejudice. I actually think the chapter is very, it's very encouraging against any judgment. And Buddha, even when he talks about Devadatta, he recalls him as a friend to, and that's something really important here. Like it's not about making even here it's all about discerning towards friendship. And yes, like if you need another person to feel your Buddhahood, it's like day and night. So as like if you don't have night, you don't understand day. So if you need some system of feedback to grow and all that. But the chapter, I find it really an encouraging chapter about being absolutely non-judgmental and absolutely accepting. And even it ends with the Bodhisattva accumulation of wisdom and Shariputra and the entire assembly in silence believed and accepted. So this is a strong chapter about acceptance. It has nothing to do with morality play or dangers of this or that. Yes, I mean, I really like the part in the presentation, but I'm not sure if the chapter is about that. So that was my comment, but maybe I'll listen and then we talk about it later.
Let me jump in here. I think, this is the way I took it, although Mark can clarify, that the chapter is kind of warning us against our own prejudices, and two of the people in there, this idea that they accepted in silence. One of my teachers in the past, his name's Jim Wilson, pointed out that it's almost like there's an embarrassed acceptance, because usually there's like there's like joy and people attaining different degrees of enlightenment and all that. And Jim pointed out that only in a very few places is there a silent acceptance, like, oh, okay. But, and it's interesting to me that it isn't just Shariputra who's kind of shown up for having a limited vision, but note the name of the bodhisattva who has his doubts, accumulated wisdom. And the idea is that traditionally it took like 3,000 major kalpas of accumulating merit and wisdom to attain Buddhahood. And so this bodhisattva is representing that idea of how long it takes to sort of earn Buddhahood, work your way up to it. And this chapter, as Mark pointed out, is about demonstrates the principle of Sokushin Jobutsu, attaining Buddhahood in this very body that you have right here and now. And it kind of undercuts that previous idea. There's so much more that could be said about this, though, all the little permutations of it. One other thing I wanted to point out, the name Devadatta. Devadatta apparently is a name like Joe Smith or something, or like whenever they're having discussions about logic and examples of people in Indian epistemology, they would bring in the name Devadatta. So if Devadatta walked up the hill with a bucket of water, and and it's just he's kind of the name for not just this particular person with an evil reputation who was related to the Buddha, but Devadatta is kind of the name for an everyman. So even Devadatta attains Buddhahood, so like every man does. At least that's kind of the impression I was getting after reading some really tedious works on Buddhist logic, and the name Devadatta kept popping up. Okay, back to you, Mark.
Thank you. Rusbe, thank you for your comment. I absolutely agree with everything you just said. That's so perhaps my choice of words didn't flow through well. When I say morality play, it's really saying to us, careful with your own personal judgments. And as Michael said, it's really a stand-in for all people to say, this is our own example. And so but I agree with what you said, 100%. So let's look at who, Devadatta, himself. He was both the cousin and the brother-in-law of the Buddha. It sounds kind of like a sitcom, but and then this is why I say there's a bit of a morality play here. In his early days, he was known as a good monk, and very very accomplished, very very nice. People apparently according to the Lotus Sutra, they liked him a lot, and he had very graceful, and he had incredible psychic powers. So very very powerful person from the practice, and somehow along the way he succumbed to jealousy, ambition, lust for power, and ultimately becoming an enemy of the Buddha and even trying to kill him 3 times. So let's fast forward from 400 BC to October 9th, 2021. Who watches Ted Lasso? Did you see the season 2 season ender last night? All right, then I'm not going to talk. I better not use this metaphor because it'll be a spoiler.
Spoil it, yeah.
Watch the season finale of season 2 of Ted Lasso, and it's exactly talking about Devadatta to a T. And I was like, my wife and I watched last night. I'm like, wow. Anyways, long story short, there's this guy, super nice guy, just completely goes off the rails because he's jealous and upset and prideful. And so I've been thinking a lot. What's really been bothering me is if chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is all you need to do, and that's it, right? The Diamond Chalice precept, yada, yada, yada. Then why are there so many Nichiren Buddhists absolutely infuriating in their intolerance and their, little boxes that they live in and stuff? And it's like, I think there's more to practicing than chanting. You gotta have the right intention. You gotta check your judgments. You gotta be aware of your prejudices. You gotta be aware of your biases. You have to be aware that we all have the 10 worlds in us, and at any time, through traumas, triggers, whatnot, we can become jealous of our neighbor and covet this and that and just succumb to anger. And when we go down that path, you know, it's like a freight train. It's like that's the famous science fiction movie. Name that movie, an express elevator to hell. By the way, it's Aliens. But you know, you just like once you get on that negativity track, you know, you're out, you're gone. And so even a person as accomplished as Devadatta, again, the stand-in for every person, can go down this path. So it's like, you know, you got to watch, you got to check yourself. You got to be, you know, super mindful and super present. And that's why we practice. That's why we practice Shuragyo, by the way. We'll get to that later. So when his attempts to murder the Buddha failed, he decided to say, I'm going to split the Sangha by trying to out Buddha the Buddha by saying, I want to add these 5 additional practices that are even more austere than the Buddha ever did. And the Buddha says, well, okay, if people want to do that, they can do that. Except he said, you can't sleep under a tree in the rain, which if you think about it, it's like, because you're going to get sick. You know, the Buddha's advice is always so practical and pragmatic. So, you know, Devadatta takes off a bunch of people. Buddha sends Shariputra over and they talk him back in. And then there's this very, very powerful verse where Devadatta is said to have swallowed up by the earth and fallen into hell. Now, the earth didn't really open up and he didn't really get sucked in there and like that. But you know, when you succumb to jealousy and ambition and lust and all that evil prejudice and intolerance and hate, where do you go? You go to hell. That's the 10 worlds, right? So it was, again, it's a morality play. It's a story about what happens when you let this happen. But again, Devadatta was the Buddha's teacher. And what this is showing us is that even our own ignorance and our own transgressions can become teachers for us to help us transform, which is, of course, our afflictions, our awakening, Bono Soko Bodai. So even the people around us who are evil, we don't need to react spitefully and hatefully to them. We can look at them with compassion and say, what can this person teach me? What can this triggering event that I just had because of some issues that I had with my mother who had passed away so long ago, what can this teach me about how I feel right now? And so Devadatta, again, the stand-in that these passions, these unwholesome experiences can in fact be a teacher to us, whether it's internal or external. And then, of course, the Buddha predicts that even Devadatta, even this really bad person who tried to commit murder, who tried to split the Sangha, even this person can, in fact, awaken, which is like a really, as you know, Rusbe, as you said, it's a very hopeful message. So Devadatta represents a cautionary example for us, like, how is this possible? How can this evil person, you know, or how can this good person become a bad person and then become a Buddha? It's just like mind-boggling, like how this happens. And Nichiren talks about in the Haki Saburo Dono Gohenji, whether or not evil persons of the latter age can attain Buddhahood does not depend on whether their sins are light or heavy, but rests solely upon whether or not they have faith, trust, and confidence in this sutra, Namu. And in the Niike Dono, he says, the Lotus Sutra is the Buddha's teaching and the Buddha's wisdom. When one puts faith in even a single character or brushstroke, one can immediately become a Buddha in one's present body. Just as poison can be turned into medicine, so the Lotus Sutra transforms ordinary beings into Buddhas. That is why it is called the Wonderful Dharma, a precious jewel. The Wonderful Dharma, the workings of that, and the manifestations of that. And then again, think about this Lotus Sutra. What is this? This is thousands of people over thousands of years encapsulated in this wonderful story about Shohojiso, the reality of life, and how this all happens together. And when we have confidence and trust that there is this Myoho principle that will transform everybody, it's fantastic. And if the Buddha's teachings really work, and he never said he was a god, he never said, you got to do exactly what I tell you. All he did was he pointed the way and said, come try it, see if it works for you. and go forth and do as you see fit. So if this really works, then the Lotus Sutra expresses this crowdsourced wisdom that says, this is thousands of people over thousands of years, men, women, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, their collective wisdom that lives on till today. And for us here, even today, our experience starts to continue to color and to, paint new pictures of the world based on this Lotus Sutra. And then as I started to read this and think about this as, an example of what can happen to anybody, and how can this incredibly talented, capable monk completely go off the rails so much. And then it was like, of course, this is the 3 obstacles and the 4 devils, or Sanshoshima. And it never, it always seemed to be very, very sort of abstract to me as a term until recently. And again, I'm just amazed how I keep finding new things. So Sensei, thank you for asking me to do this, because it's just helped my practice. And I hope my example helps you find your own truths in these words. So the 3 obstacles and the 4 devils, and please don't think that these devils are like, the guys with the horns and the tail and, some dude, that's going to like come out and like play Halloween tricks on you. This is metaphorical stuff. Okay. So the 3 obstacles are the obstacle of earthly desires arising from the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness. So this is like jealousy, lust, all that stuff that I want, and I want what you got, so I'm going to get it, and I'm going to get it before you get it. So it's like, I'm going to claw all over you until I get it. And then the obstacle of karma, of course, karma, which is, unwholesome things result in unwholesome rewards, and the corollary is true. But we have bad karma, things happen to us, and it's like we don't know why it happened, and it's like, well, this practice doesn't work. Screw it. I'm stopping. I'm gonna go do something else, or this doesn't work. I'm not gonna do Gongyo today. And the obstacle of retribution caused by the karmic effects. And then the 4 devils, or hindrances, are the 5 components of our 5 aggregates: the earthly desires, death of someone we love close to us, and death of perhaps ourself, which causes doubt. I became a Buddhist and, I took Gojukai, which is what they call it in Nichiren Shoshu. I took that in 1975. And in 1990, my wife got cancer. And I stopped practicing for a while because it just like completely crushed me. It's like, well, how could this possibly happen? I'm chanting, I got this GoFu stuff from my wife, this like keto magical blessings, and she had cancer. She almost died, and like it's like this practice doesn't work. So I went down that whole rat hole myself. So that's an example of this. And then the hindrance of unwholesome, devilish things and around our life that manifest around us to cause one to discard one's practice. It could be, evil influencers. If you spend time on Facebook or, whatever, you're going to find people who, just get up on their soapbox and start spouting all kinds of stuff, whatever it is. And you think, well, maybe that's true. I don't know, maybe it's going to influence me. So you got to be really careful. You got to be really mindful about these 3 obstacles and 4 devils as it comes up, because this is these are what are the cause for good monks to go down the path that Devadatta did. And Jiri, Master Tiantai, states in his great Calming and Contemplation, if you are diligent in both practicing and understanding, awareness, mindfulness, then the 3 obstacles and 4 devils that hinder your awareness will contend with each other and arise in your thoughts. Without a doubt, if you are practicing, you will hit Sanshoshima. This will multiply your darkness and magnify your distractions, thus shading and disturbing the light of your concentration. You should not follow after nor be afraid of these phenomena. If you follow after them, they will lead you to evil destinies, just like it did with Devadatta. If you fear them, they will hinder your cultivation of the correct Dharma practice. And you should utilize the practice of contemplation to contemplate the darkness and thus brighten the awareness. You should utilize the practice of calming to stop the distractions, and thus the distractions will be quiescent. So yes, we can't know the light without the dark. It's just a fact. It's just what's going to happen. So know that you are going to hit points in your practice where, things get rocky, and don't let it stop you from going. So look at it like, yeah, this is coming up in my life. This is predicted. This is normal. I'm doing it right. Keep going. Don't let it defeat you. Don't let yourself succumb. And for Nichiren practitioners, what does this mean? Because we don't, our primary practice is not sitting silently. Our primary practice is chanting Daimoku. So Jiri talks about this further on in his great work, single-mindedly chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo with humility and repentance, deeply trusting in Myoho Renge Kyo as if your life depended on it. Now, this is my adaptation, because what he really said was single-mindedly chanting the name of a Buddha, but the rest is the same. So that's our practice, and we do that. And if we have trust and confidence in this, we'll get through it, because that's just how life is. So Ichantika, evil people, while the Buddha predicted Devadatta would awaken, it's really important to know that this isn't like just going to happen because he woke up in the morning. It's conditional. Okay. It's conditional on freeing himself of the fetters of ignorance, hatred, and greed, and having a strong practice. And Jackie Stone writes in her book about Nichiren's perspective, Buddha nature and seed of Buddhahood are similar, that they both include the potential for Buddhahood, supreme awakening. But where nature is constant and unchanging, seeds can lie dormant, even rot, or germinate, become Devadatta, and grow in response to conditions. As the Lotus Sutra says, the Buddha seeds germinate through dependent origination practice. That's from Buddha to Buddha side by Jackie Stone and Don Lopez. And Tiantai Jiri wrote, Buddha nature has three causes: the innate potential, so it's there, the wisdom that illuminates it, and the practice that manifests that wisdom. So you got to do something. And for Nichiren, it was very much that he taught the sacred title was the seed of Buddhahood. So yes, Devadatta will become awakened, but he's gonna have to do something. He or she is gonna have to do something to get themselves back on track. But it's possible. And how you do it? Well, you do it with good friends. The Buddha said to the monks, and this is in chapter 12, the king of that time was me, and we chanted it today. And the hermit of that time is now the man Devadatta. Because Devadatta was my good friend, I was able to perfect the 6 paramitas, as well as loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And for those of you who have been participating in our Wednesday secular Shodaigyo and our Thursday Buddhist Shodaigyo, you know that we very much focus as good friends together, developing these mental muscles of concentration, calming, clarity, insight, equanimity, and friendliness, loving kindness. So we're very much working on developing these skills as together, because meditation really isn't just a single practice. Meditation is something we do together. And these are from Michael. Okay. Michael, from his dictionary, these definitions of what a good friend is and how you acquire good friends and how important they are. Justin, you got to mute. The Dragon Princess. So beautiful picture from the Dragon Princess herself. Nichiren used the Dragon Princess to determine that the Lotus Sutra enables women to attain Buddhahood as women, because it embodies the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. He writes, also, the example of the dragon girl attaining Buddhahood does not mean only her. It means the attainment of Buddhahood by all women. In the Hinayana Sutras expounded before the Lotus Sutra, women were not thought capable of attaining Buddhahood. Various Mahayana sutras appear to recognize women attaining Buddhahood are being reborn in a Pure Land, but only after they transform themselves. This is not the immediate attainment of Buddhahood in this world, which can only be possible through the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment doctrine. Therefore, that precious teaching about attaining Buddhahood or being reborn in the Pure Land is in name only. On the other hand, the attainment of Buddhahood by a dragon girl is a precedent that opens the way for women of the latter age to attain Buddhahood or be reborn in the Pure Land. And this is the Kaimokosho translation by Reverend McCormick from his new book. So this is, of course, Nichiren's two most important works, the Kaimokosho and the Kanjin Honzon-sho, and really emphasizes that women can, in fact, attain awakening. And my personal interpretation of this chapter is when you really read about everything the dragon princess brought to this scene, she was already enlightened. And so, Justin, you got to stay muted. Or someone's, everybody just double check real quick. So she only transformed as skillful means because of the meager understanding and the meager insights of the men in the group, that they had to see something different in order for that to happen. But after that happened, she was still a woman. And so she did this just as skillful means. And once they saw that with their Buddha eye, they were able to then see, everybody can attain awakening. It was my judgment, it was my prejudice that had this idea that that wasn't possible. And Nichiren, of course, is very specific that, in fact, everybody can. And that the equality of everyone in the Shohojiso, the dragon princess. And then she says, of course, in chapter 12, I have offered my precious pearl to the world-honored one, and he has accepted it. Did this happen quickly? They answered, yes, quite quickly. She said, by means of your transcendent powers, watch me become a Buddha even more quickly than that. And at that moment, the entire assembly watched as the Buddha girl instantly transformed into a male and accomplished all bodhisattva deeds. She immediately went to the domain pure and clean in the southern quarter and sat on the jeweled lotus flower. There she attained perfect awakening, the 32 marks, the 80 kinds of beautiful features. She universally proclaimed the wondrous Dharma Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to all beings on 10 directions. So sudden transformation in this body transcends all gender identifications, whatever it is. It's just gender and cultural gender identification are part of the Saha world, but above, the universal, the infinite that we attain awakening into, it transcends all of these kind of social norms and social constructs. Nichiren, of course, wrote that everyone possessed it, not only sentient beings, but insentient beings. And when you observe this with the Buddha eye, you realize that this just transcends all. Okay. So what does chapter 12 mean to us? We're on time. Good. First, a verse from the Dhammapada. Hatred is never appeased through hatred in this world. By love alone is it appeased. This is an ancient law. And this applies to ourselves almost more than how we treat others. Personal transformation and awakening is possible for all of us, no matter what. Everybody can attain awakening. That means you are worthwhile. You can attain awakening too through this practice. It does require effort and work. So chant with joy, humility, and repentance. And if you don't feel like it, just keep going anyways, because that's just Sanso Shima, that's just getting in your way. Just keep going. And as you're doing this, be vigilant in observing your intentions, being alert for signs of, are you being judgmental? Are you being ambitious? Are you being prideful? Are you expressing prejudices? Are you having biases about, whatever it might be? And that this insight to this idea is why we use Shodaigyo to train and develop ourselves, so that we can be vigilant in observing, how are we feeling right now? What's going on inside me? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I somewhere in the middle? Am I calm? Am I agitated? Where am I right now? And these skills don't just, we're not, we have the capability of it, but we're not just born with it. So we have to train for it. Our practice is for our mind and our spirit what going to the gym is for our body. You just don't run off and do a marathon. You're going to hurt yourself. So, but to really become clear, like, ooh, I'm being really angry right now. I'm being very arrogant right now. I'm being very judgmental right now. I'm very anxious right now. If you don't have the clarity, you're not going to see that. And you're just going to keep perpetuating these unwholesome causes in your life, and things are going to be miserable. So our practice, this is why we practice, to develop these insights. And it starts with calming, and then it develops into insight, and it applies to equanimity and then loving kindness, and we start treating ourselves with love ourselves and others, and we realize that, boy, everybody is worthy, including ourselves. There's no reason to self-hate. Although I'm the poster child for self-hate. Boy, I can get more down on myself than anybody can get down on me. I can do it better than anybody. I guarantee it. And that we associate with good friends, people who can help us. And when we fall down, they're there to help pick us up. When they fall down, we're there to help pick them up. And this is why the Sangha is so important, and why investing our time and energy in building the Sangha is so important. And the Sangha is a garden, and it needs constant tending, care, and nurturing. Anybody who likes gardening will know that you don't just plant, trees and flowers in your garden and then walk away and come back 2 years later and it's not complete and utter chaos out there. The weeds came and the plants died and you didn't water them and blah, blah, blah. So every moment you gotta, be mindful. That's what we're developing. And I feel like there's one word in Nichiren Buddhism that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, is mindfulness. Being present in the moment. That's the ultimate, that's the fourth siddhanta. When we talk about the four siddhantas, worldly benefit, working on our good points, working on our bad points, and then personal self-awakening, self-actualization. That's mindfulness. That's being present in the moment and seeing everything as it really is without our own biases and our own filters, our mental formations, coloring it into some other kind of distorted reality and having us chase after things that are already gone and worried about things that haven't happened yet. But the ultimate benefit of our practice is being mindful and being present and being there for ourselves and for other people. So everything that we just talked about today, that's in the Lotus Sutra. And as I said, the Lotus Sutra is, 2,500 years of crowdsourced wisdom in this beautiful poetic document that Nichiren said, I can abstract it even deeper than that. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo encompasses all of the Lotus Sutra. So when we say Myoho Renge Kyo, we're expressing all of these wisdoms that you are worthwhile, you can attain awakening as you are right now, and we can do all of this through love. So I hope that today makes you want to chant more, not less. And just remember, you are going to hit Sancho Shima, and it's just how things work. So don't give up. Don't be scared. It's just like when your mind wanders, which it will, because that's just what minds do. Realize your mind wandered, smile for waking up, and then start again. Simply begin again. So when Sancho Shima happens, don't freak out. Don't become fearful. Say, oh, yeah, this is a sign that I'm doing it. And because I saw it, because I recognized it as Sancho Shima, that's the secret. That's the moment. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo.